name is Sarah, and I'm going to try and read 100 books in 100 days. One might ask, why go after such a moronically ambitious goal as my first try at creative content making? The answer is pretty simple. You see, I'm a little bit of a sadist who loves, those subtle forms of self-flagellation. As much truth as there is to that, it actually came about when I started keeping track of the names of the books that I read at the beginning of the year. At the end of January, I did a little bit of an inventory and noticed I was reading close to a book a day without really actually trying. So, me being me, thought, let's make it a competition, even if it's only with myself. So here I am. The reason I'm doing these videos is I want something to really motivate me to get through this. This is a big challenge, and I'm not, blind to the fact that this is going to take a lot of work. And so I think publicly announcing that I'm going to do it will be very helpful for me. A secondary reason is that I love books. I mean, you kind of have to read 100 books in 100 days. And I love gushing about books. And so I'm going to take this as an opportunity to talk about the books that I love, talk about the books that I hate, just obsess over the fact that there are authors out there that can create these amazing worlds, tell these amazing stories, use, words and symbolisms that I would never think of. So like any great challenge, I think there has to be some ground rules. My first ground rule is that I want at least 30% of the books that I read to be counted in my vegetables category. So what my vegetables category are, it's kind of like when your parents tell you that you need to eat your vegetables, same kind of idea. I think a good literary diet is just as balanced as the foods that you put in your body. What I'm counting in this category is anything nonfiction and anything that is considered to have high literary merit. So think your classics. My second rule is that I want no more of the books that I'm going to read to be rereads for me. So going back to the same analogy as before, it's great to have Old Reliable, to have that meal you can eat once a week. I don't think you grow unless you venture outside of what you already know. Rule number 3. I want to keep the cost of the books for this exercise to be under $50 a month. I love looking at pictures of those giant bookshelves full of hardcovers that are arranged, by color. I think it's beautiful. But right now I have a lot of other financial priorities, and I can't devote as much money as that would require to books. My fourth rule is that I want the total page count to be at least 25,000. My thought process behind that is that I want it to be about the length of an average novel, so 250-ish pages per book. I know I may have books that are way over that. I know I may have books that are way under that, but I want to average, right about a novel length. How may I keep track of this is I'm planning to post a video for every 10 books that I read. In those videos, I plan on spending the first half reviewing the books that I just read, the last 10 books I just read, and I'm going to spend the second half of it introducing the books that I'll be reading in the next 10. So, hopefully that should be able to keep me honest, give me an opportunity to talk about the great parts of the books, the bad parts of the books, and everything in between. So now I should probably warn you for what you're going to expect. So at the end of this video, I am going to introduce the first 10 of my books I'm going to read for this challenge, and I think you'll notice something. I really enjoy fantasy novels, I really enjoy sci-fi novels, I really enjoy thriller novels. I have a pretty wide palette, honestly. I love, those darker classics. I love The Bell Jar. I love One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I love Slaughterhouse-Five. Those books where the protagonist might not always be the most sane. I love those. So you'll see a lot of those in my palette. So you'll see a lot of YA novels. But you also see something else. I think that one of the beauties of reading is that you get to learn about people very different from yourself, people that you might never meet, historical figures, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. I think it's really important to understand the influential people that came before you. So you'll see a number of biography, a number of memoirs in my to-be-read list. And then finally, you'll see a decent number of books based around the financial system and income inequality. Income inequality is a large point of passion for me and has been the subject of a decent amount of reading that I've already done. So, without further ado, let's get into my first 10 books. The first one I want to talk about is Thunderhead. I actually bought this right after I finished the first book in the series, which is Scythe. If you have not read the book Scythe, it is phenomenal. It was one of those books that I ran outside the bedroom when I was done with it and just started jumping up and down and saying, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, it was so good. I think my boyfriend was minorly annoyed with me that night because that's all I could talk about. So I'm very excited for Thunderhead. It's by Neil Shusterman. Basic premise is that you're living in this dystopian-ish world where people no longer die mortal deaths. So there's this group that are appointed and they are called the Scythe. My next one and my first vegetable on the list is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This was written in the late 1800s, and this is one of my vegetable books for this grouping. It's a relatively quick read. It's, at 120 pages. I'm very excited about it. Next YA novel is by Holly Bodger, and it's 5-1. The premise here is basically a world where men disproportionately outnumber women, and so there has to be, tests to decide whether a man is, worthy of a wife. It follows two characters. It should be a really interesting novel. This is actually what I got used offline. My next vegetable is a rental from my library, which is Marx's Das Kapital, which is a biography of Karl Marx by Francis Wien. Short little book. This goes into my love of reading about historical figures. I think it should be really interesting. Next one, Hillbilly Elegy. So this is by J.D. Vance, and it's a memoir talking about J.D. growing up in Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains, as well as Ohio, and talking about the culture of the Appalachians, talking about, this culture that's kind of in crisis. Next one is Awake. This is by Natasha Preston. This is a YA thriller novel with the basis being a girl who forgot her memory for the first 4 years of her life. It implies that she somehow gets it back during the novel from the synopsis. This was actually recommended to me, so I'm excited to see how that pans out. My next one is also a YA novel, but this one is a little bit older. Supposedly penned by an anonymous drug addict, that's Alice. My last physical book is Marissa Meyer's Renegades. So this is another YA sci-fi novel. I think it's going to be really cool. So now for my books that I do not have physical forms of. So the first is another classic. It is called Ethan Frome. It is by Edith Wharton and was written in the early 1900s. And it's basically based in New England. It's a short little story. It's only about 67 pages. And my last book is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So he is actually the author of A Darker Shade of Magic, which is also on my list. I know there's superpowers in this novel. I know it's darker. It definitely checks a lot of boxes for me. So, a great collection of books, wide variety. I really tried to focus this group on kind of doing a disproportionate amount of meeting the requirements. So you'll notice that 4 of the books that I mentioned are counted in my vegetables category. I purposely did a little bit more than, I have to do on an average basis, because I want to front load a lot of the parameter meeting towards the beginning. I am going into this with my eyes wide open that I might be a little bit busier towards the end of this. So I want to really pack in a lot of the heavy lifting earlier in the challenge. You'll also notice that my page count is a little bit higher than average. So while I have to average about 2,500 words or 2,500 pages per group, I actually have around 2,800 pages in this group. So hopefully that should, make a pretty big dent and allow me to read maybe shorter books or fewer very large books towards the end of this challenge. So overall, I'm very, very excited about this. I'm very excited about my first 10 books. I'm very excited about the 90 books after that as well. And I hope that you decide to follow my journey. This is something I'm really honestly excited about, and I'm excited to push myself and see what I can actually do. So, wish me luck.